The headlights of my Jeep cut across the driveway, casting long shadows against the side of the craftsman-style house, nestled on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona. Just before the beams hit the garage, I caught a flicker, someone moving. Quick, intentional. If Adam hadn't insisted I reverse a bit to straighten out, I never would have seen it. "You saw that right?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. He nodded, tense in the glow of the dashboard lights. "That's why I didn't want to park here," he murmured. "There's always someone by the garage. I don't care what Mom says, I'm not imagining it." I cut the engine, eyes fixed on the two-story home that used to be mine, the one I'd spent 6 grueling months building for Amelia, my ex-wife of just over a year. Twinkle lights hung lazily along the backyard fence, where silhouettes of wine glasses and idle chatter floated through the desert air. "A backyard gathering," I muttered. Invitation said, "Casual." "Nothing about Mom is casual," Adam said quietly. I looked over at my son. This is the first time he shook his head. "I've heard weird stuff at night, sometimes footsteps, sometimes whispers." I rested a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, telling me." The invitation had claimed to be a gesture of goodwill, fresh start dinner among old friends, but I knew Amelia too well, and I hadn't forgotten walking into our bedroom to find her with Daniel Fraser, me ex-best friend and former business partner, just 6 months after he'd pressured me into signing over 35% of our contracting firm. The divorce court hadn't cared that I laid every foundation stone of this place with my own hands. I lost the house, lost my equity, but I gained sole custody of Adam when Amelia declared parenting was too constricting for her creative awakening. Dad Adam's voice broke into my thoughts. "We can leave if you want." "No, we're going in." I studied the house like a job site, noting the uneven siding, the flickering porch light. She was letting the place rot. But I wasn't here to fix her house. I was here to see why she suddenly wanted us back inside it, and who was lurking near my old garage. What I didn't tell Adam was the invitation hadn't surprised me. I'd made sure it happened, called in a few favors, set the pieces in motion. This night had been 6 months in the making. Amelia and Daniel thought they were hosting a reunion. They didn't realize they'd just stepped into the first phase of a blueprint I'd been drafting since the day they took everything from me. 15 years in Army intelligence had taught me a lot. Patience, strategy, and above all, never confront your enemy until you've already won. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about precision. The front door opened before we even knocked. Amelia stood there in a halo of light, her face perfectly made up, her smile more strained than sincere. "Jesse," she said sweetly, "you came." She air-kissed my cheek, a fog of lavender and white wine trailing her. "And Adam," she added with false cheer, "come say hi to your mom." Adam offered a quick, polite hug. I watched her flinch at how stiff he was. Quite a crowd, I noted, scanning the softly lit living room. 12 or 15 guests, wine glasses in hand, music low, the kind of scene that pretends everything is fine. And there by the fireplace, it laid brick by brick, stood Daniel, laughing, holding court, wearing a tailored smile. Our eyes met, and his dropped instantly. "Just old friends," Amelia said, looping her arm through mine and leading us in. "I've been meaning to reach out," she murmured. "I think it's time we let the past go, don't you?" I smiled. "Absolutely." Behind her, I saw Daniel make a quick exit into the kitchen. My instincts kicked in. "Mind if I use the restroom?" I asked. "Of course," she said, waving vaguely toward the stairs. "You know where everything is." But I didn't go upstairs. I moved down the hallway like I had in Kandahar, silent, calculated. Daniel was at the back door to the garage, back-turned fingers flying across the keypad. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't innocent, and he had no idea I was already behind him. It was a door that never used to have a lock knot when I lived there. "Planning an exit strategy?" I asked coolly. Daniel spun around, color draining from his face. Jesse, man, you scared me. Seems like everyone's on edge tonight. I stepped closer. New security measures, he muttered. Amelia's idea? He slid to the side, casually blocking the keypad with his shoulder. After the break-in, a pause. Couple months back. Nothing serious, just some punk kids. Broke into the garage. First I'd heard of it. Funny I said Adam never mentioned anything. Daniel forced a chuckle. You know, kids. Selective memory. Right. He glanced nervously toward the hallway. Anyway, Amelia's looking for you. Probably best you head back. I nodded, playing along. Let him think I bought it. But I'd seen the code. 389. Same sequence we used for the lockbox on our very first job site. I'd picked it. Old school phone, keypad, code FTX. The call sign of the forward base I flew out of on my last mission. At dinner, I kept a close eye on Amelia and Daniel. No real interaction. Just enough distance to make it obvious they weren't what they pretended to be. The other guests' props. A handful of colleagues, 2 neighbors, none of whom seemed to know why they'd been invited. So Jesse, one of Amelia's friends, asked, Are you seeing anyone? Dad's got a girlfriend. Adam chimed in before I could answer. Her name's Meredith. She teaches music at my school. Amelia's grip on her wine glass tightened. His teacher. How convenient. Music teacher. I clarified, smiling calmly. And we're just friends. Technically true. Meredith Blake was his music teacher. But she was also a former Army intelligence analyst, and the reason I uncovered what Daniel and Amelia were really doing. As dessert wrapped, I stepped away, claiming a phone call. Instead, I slipped out the front door and circled the house. A narrow window on the side gave a cloudy view into the garage. Through the dust-streaked glass, I saw outlines containers stacked against the far wall, a workbench covered in unfamiliar equipment. Then movement. Someone gloved, hunched working, quietly beneath a hanging bulb. It wasn't Daniel. And it definitely wasn't Amelia. I didn't recognize him at all. I snapped several quick photos with my phone and slipped back into the house before anyone noticed. As Adam and I got ready to leave, Amelia pulled me aside. I've been thinking, she said, placing her hand lightly on my forearm. Maybe we could try again. For Adam's sake. Her eyes searched mine the way they used to when she wanted something. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I've moved on, Amelia, I said, softly pulling back. But thanks for the thought. Her smile tightened. You always were so absolute. Some things stay broken, I replied, already thinking of the photos in my pocket. Good night, Amelia. As we drove away, Adam looked over. You okay, Dad? I checked the rearview mirror, watching the house fade into the dark. I will be, I said. We both will be. That night, I sent the photos to Meredith with a single message. Confirmed. They're using the garage. Phase 2 begins. 3 days later, we sat in her downtown apartment, files spread across the table. Adam was at a sleepover, giving us the space we needed. The results came back, Meredith said, sliding a folder toward me. Phenol, lidocaine, several synthetic opioids. This isn't recreational. I opened the folder, scanning the lab results traces pulled from external vents near the garage. Over the past month, Meredith had quietly run recon under the guise of evening neighborhood jogs, discreetly collecting samples. She'd never really left the field, just changed how she operated. Medical grade, I muttered, matches what Daniel's been importing. I stared at the chemical breakdown, jaw clenched. I'd once built homes with this man. Now he was turning my garage into something far more dangerous. I hadn't expected pharmaceuticals. I figured it might be tax fraud, offshore account, typical white-collar offenses. But Claire's background in military intelligence helped us uncover something much darker. Daniel wasn't just importing illegal drugs, he was manufacturing custom synthetic opioids in the garage of the home I built, using the international supply chains I'd developed through my former construction business. Here's the twist, Claire said, tapping her tablet to pull up a local news article. 3 overdose deaths, all within the past 8 weeks. All traced back to the same untraceable pills. I stared at the victims' photos. Teens, one barely older than my son. They're killing people, Jessie Claire said, locking eyes with me. And they're doing it using your reputation as cover. I felt a cold surge in my gut. The DEA's involved, she continued. But they're focused on established suppliers. Your company's flagged, but no one's drawn a direct line to Daniel yet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at nothing. I'd once called Daniel my brother, my closest friend since ROTC. He'd been my best man. I trusted him with everything. When Amelia left me for him, I thought that was the ultimate betrayal, I muttered. Turns out, that was just the start. What about the blueprints to the house? Claire asked. I pulled them up from an old cloud backup. Here, I said, zooming into a section beneath the garage. This access tunnel. Originally for plumbing and electrical, I built it because the property sits on a shallow aquifer. Needed it in case of flooding. Claire studied the plans. Could someone use it to enter the garage undetected? If they knew it was there, I said slowly. The entrance is behind the basement shelving unit, just wide enough to crawl through. And who knows about it, me? And now you, not even Amelia. She was never interested in anything beneath the surface of the house or me. Claire gave me a familiar razor-edged grin, the kind I'd learned meant we had an opening. Then we have our entry point. 2 nights later, we executed the plan. Adam was with my sister in Charlotte for the weekend, same as always. Gave us the window we needed without raising suspicion. I spent the day at the office, deliberately visible, checking in with employees, logging activity, building the perfect alibi. At midnight, I met Claire near an old hardware supply warehouse a few blocks from the house. Her car was parked behind it, out of sight from security cams. They're out, she confirmed, glancing at her burner phone. Daniel's at a fundraiser with donors downtown. Amelia left an hour ago to meet him. Alarm systems live, but I've got the override. I arched a brow. Should I even ask? You shouldn't, she replied, handing me a tactical backpack. Everything you need's in here. No confrontation, just evidence collection. We cut through a narrow stand of pines behind the property. The tunnel entrance was disguised as a drainage spout, concealed beneath fake shrubbery. I'd installed myself. I pulled away the plastic rock, revealing the crawl space. Claire peered in. Cozy. It gets worse, I warned, flipping on my headlamp. We crawled for nearly 60 feet through damp concrete and stale air, ducking under low-hanging wires I'd forgotten were even there. The tunnel eventually opened into the basement utility closet. I carefully slid the panel aside and peered into the storage room beyond. Silence. We crept through the basement and up the stairs. The kitchen was still. The red glow of the garage keypad blinked steadily in the dark. I typed in 4389. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Classic Daniel, cocky enough to keep using the same access code I created back in our early days. The garage was unrecognizable. Gone were the tool racks and concrete dust. In their place, a full-scale lab. Ventilation systems, pressure-sealed canisters, stainless steel counters, industrial-grade pill presses, and vacuum sealers. Everything labeled, everything precise. This isn't some backyard operation, Claire murmured, snapping photo after photo. They're in full-scale production. I moved toward an old tool cabinet tucked into the corner and pulled out my lockpicks from the side pocket of my bag. Within seconds, it popped open. Inside were binders, handwritten ledgers, international shipping manifests, and private client lists. I took photos of each page, methodically making sure every name and number was legible. Jessie Claire called quietly from across the garage. "You need to see this." She stood beside a large chest freezer I didn't recognize. When she opened the lid, a chill escaped, and not just from the cold. Inside were rows of vacuum-sealed packets, each labeled with chemical names and molecular symbols I didn't recognize. "What is this? Enough synthetic opioids to wipe out half of Georgia," she said, her face pale in the glow of the freezer light. "This isn't a backyard operation anymore. This is industrial-scale trafficking." A car engine rumbled faintly in the distance, then louder. Headlights cut through the cracks of the garage door. "Someone's coming," I said. I shut the freezer, and we hurried to reset the room exactly how we found it before slipping back down into the basement. Footsteps echoed above us just as we reached the tunnel entrance. The kitchen door creaked open. Voices followed Amelia's, and a man who definitely wasn't Daniel. "I told you not to show up here," Amelia snapped. "Reed will check the cameras." "I don't answer to Reed." The man replied, his voice low, impatient, familiar. "We had an agreement." "Well, that agreement just changed," she said. "Reed says we need to speed things up. Jess is sniffing around. Me." So the man asked, almost bored, "Has a builder. What's he gonna do?" Amelia let out a bitter laugh. "You don't know Jesse. He was special ops. If he figures this out, he won't call the cop shell come for you." There was a pause. "Then maybe we should remove Jesse from the equation." "No," she said quickly. "No murder. That wasn't the deal. Tell that to the 3 kids who died last month. That wasn't supposed to happen?" Amelia's voice cracked. "Reed swore the batches were safe." "Nothing's safe anymore, Amelia. And you're drowning in this." Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the house. Claire and I stayed frozen, listening to the silence, before carefully sliding back through the tunnel. Once we were outside, cloaked by the dark woods behind the property, I finally spoke. "She's panicking." "She should be," Claire replied, glancing at her phone. "We've got enough evidence to bury them in federal charges." "It's not enough," I said, my mind on those 3 dead teenagers. On Adam. Prison's too kind. She studied me for a moment. "So, what are you thinking?" "Phase 3, I said. "The hard part?" She gave a small, grim smile. "The right part. I'm in." Back at my loft apartment above the bike shop, I laid out the final plan. Not just taking them down, but dismantling everything they built. Their finances, their reputations, their connections. I wanted them to feel every piece of what they tried to take from me. "We start by turning their allies," I told Claire. The man whose voice we'd heard earlier was Paul Rivasa, disgraced chemist with ties to international labs. Through Claire's network, we'd confirmed he was Daniel's primary supplier and technical advisor. He had a record, a weakness for control, and, more importantly, a temper. I arranged to meet him at a 24-hour diner outside Macon. He slid into the booth across from me, eyes sharp, body tense. "You've got some nerve bringing me out here," he said. I placed a sealed envelope between us. "You'll want to look at this." Inside were high-resolution photos of Daniel shaking hands with a rival chemist in Savannah, someone cheaper but known for botched batches. Alongside them, transcripts of Daniel plotting to cut Paul out. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, color draining from his face. "Does it matter?" I said evenly. "He's been playing you, Paul, since day 1. His hands trembled as he slid the documents back into the envelope. "What do you want?" he asked. "You want me to talk? Go to the feds." Eventually, I said. "But first, I want to burn him from the inside. And I want your full withdrawal from the operation. Effective immediately." "Logan's going to know it was me," Preston muttered. I gave him a cold smile. "Logan's going to be far too busy dealing with what's coming to worry about you." The next piece moved into place. I reached out to Amelia's older sister, Carla Whitman, a high school guidance counselor in her mid-50s. Carla had never liked me, but she adored Mason. I sent her a sealed packet with photocopies of the lab results, along with photos of the drug stockpiles found in the same garage where Mason had occasionally stayed overnight. 3 days later, she called me, her voice shaking. "Tell me it's not true," she pleaded. Tell me Amelia's not part of this. I wish I could, I said, letting weariness and sorrow seep into my voice. But Mason's safety has to come first. What are you going to do? What I have to. I need to take Mason out of town for a while, just until this is over. By the end of the week, Logan's operation began to buckle. Preston's departure had jammed the supply chain. Carla had confronted Amelia in a very public breakdown during a charity auction at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, screaming about dead children and blood money. Guests recorded everything. The pressure was mounting, and I was just getting started. The next move, the families. Using the evidence Claire and I had gathered, I quietly reached out to the parents of the 3 teenagers who had overdosed. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. I simply connected them to Miles Ferris, an aggressive wrongful death attorney with a reputation for dismantling pharmaceutical companies brick by brick. Within 72 hours, Ferris had filed discovery motions against multiple distributors, including my own company. I welcomed the scrutiny publicly. I held a press conference. I opened my books. I cooperated fully with law enforcement and pointed them ever so helpfully toward the shadowy international routes Logan had used without my consent. The media hailed me as a responsible business owner trying to root out corruption. Then my phone rang. It was Logan. "What the hell did you do?" he snarled. Me, I kept my tone level. "I haven't done a thing." "Cut the crap! This has your fingerprints all over it." "You mean like the fingerprints you left when you stole half my company? Or when you slept with Amelia? Or when you turned my house into a narcotics lab?" Silence. Heavy. Unyielding. "We need to meet," he said finally. "Just the 2 of us. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix on my end. But sure, let's meet. Tonight. At the house. 810. Come alone." I had no intention of going alone. Claire had already looped in her old team at Military Intelligence, who in turn contacted the DEA. Every piece was in place. At 7:30, I parked on the street outside the home I'd built with my own 2 hands, not in the driveway. Never again. I texted Claire in position. She replied, "Teams standing by." I walked calmly to the door. Logan opened it before I could knock. His $1,000 shirt was crumpled. His pupils were pinpoints. "You ruined everything," he said bitterly. "No," I replied, stepping inside. "You did that to yourself. Where's Amelia gone?" "Packed up this morning and ran to her sister's. Carla kicked her out, called her poison." He chuckled darkly. The house felt empty. Hollow. A monument to everything they'd built on lies. Logan led me to the kitchen. A bottle of scotch was already open, half drained. "Drink," I shook my head. "I need to stay clear for this." "Suit yourself." He threw back 3 fingers like water. "So, what's your angle, Jesse? You want your company, back money. I want justice." He snorted, still playing the Boy Scout. He leaned forward. "You know what happens to Boy Scouts in the real world, Jesse? They get buried. Is that a threat?" "No, just an observation." Then he stood and pulled a pistol from behind his waistband, pointed it at my chest. "I didn't want this," he said flatly, "but you forced my hand." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "Put it down, Logan." "It's over," I said. "It's only over when I say it's over." Logan snapped. He motioned toward the garage door with his pistol. "Move." I obeyed, keeping my hands where he could see them. He keyed in the garage code one-handed and shoved me through the door. The garage looked hastily cleared, lab equipment, boxed up supplies stacked near the exit. He was preparing to run. "You really thought I didn't have a contingency plan," he sneered, closing the door behind us. "I've been preparing for this day since the beginning. Preparing for what? Murder survival," he replied coldly, motioning to a metal folding chair. "Sit. I'll stand." Logan's nostrils flared. "That wasn't a request. And that's not an option," I replied. "If you're going to shoot me, do it while I'm standing." For a moment I saw hesitation in his eyes. Then it vanished. "You always had a death wish," he said. "All those combat deployments, taking the riskiest jobs. Maybe deep down you thought you didn't deserve to come home." He wasn't wrong. Losing my unit in that ambush overseas had left me haunted. Building this house had been my therapy, laying every brick by hand to create something that lasted. "The difference between us," I said, "is I can live with the consequences of what I've done." Logan chuckled darkly. "So can his starting with ending this little threat you pose." He raised the pistol. "You won't pull that trigger," I said. "And why not?" "Because this place is surrounded by federal agents," I said calmly. "And they just heard everything you said." His eyes flicked to the windows. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I tapped the collar of my shirt, where a pin-sized microphone was clipped. "Say hello to the DEA, Logan." Right on cue, white floodlights exploded through the garage windows. Federal agents. "The building is surrounded." "Come out with your hands up," a voice shouted through a megaphone. Logan's face twisted with rage. He lunged at me. I sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted, hard disarming him in one fluid motion. His body slammed against the workbench, sending tools and boxes scattering. He recovered fast, driving a fist into my jaw. Pain flared through my skull, but I countered with an elbow to his ribs. He doubled over with a grunt. "It didn't have to be this way," I said. He spat blood. "It was always going to be this way since the day you introduced me to Amelia." He came at me again, wild and reckless. This time I was ready. I dropped low and executed a takedown, driving him to the ground. His head hit the concrete with a dull thud. The garage door burst open. Agents swarmed in. Claire was with them, flashing her credentials. "Clear," she shouted, before rushing over to me. "You good?" I nodded, watching as two agents cuffed Logan, now groaning and semi-conscious on the floor. "What about Amelia?" I asked. "In custody. Picked her up from Carla's house an hour ago." Outside, I stood by as evidence boxes and Logan were loaded into separate black SUVs. Yellow tape already ringed the house I'd once called home. Agent Tran, the DEA lead, approached. "Mr. Mercer, we'll need a full statement tomorrow. For now, you're free to go. What happens to the house? Asset forfeiture." Given Amelia's ownership stake and the crimes committed on site, I looked up at the second-story window, what used to be Mason's bedroom. "I'd like to buy it back when that's all finalized." Tran raised an eyebrow. "Most people wouldn't want a place with this kind of past." "It's not about the house," I said. "It's about reclaiming what was stolen." 3 months later, Mason and I stood in the newly gutted garage. Clean drywall, new flooring, bright light filled the room. "What do you think?" I asked. He walked around slowly. "Basketball hoop here, workbench there." He paused. "And maybe a music corner. Claire could teach me guitar out here." I smiled. I loved that plan. Logan's fortune was gone. The settlements from the wrongful death lawsuits bankrupted him. He'd spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Amelia flipped on him and received 12 years with parole. In return, she signed over her rights to the property to avoid further charges. Carla petitioned for visits with Mason. I agreed. She'd always loved him, and she'd helped when it mattered. As for Claire and me, we were taking our time. She'd moved to a small place nearby, close enough for dinners, far enough to protect what we were still building. Mason nudged me. "Dad, can we get pizza to celebrate?" I ruffled his hair. "Absolutely." "And Mason?" "Yeah. Thank you for telling me not to park in the garage that night." He shrugged. "I just didn't want you to get hurt." I wrapped my arm around his shoulder. "That's what family does. We look out for each other." Behind us, the garage door shut on the past. We stepped inside our home and into the future we built with our own hands.